Welcome to another episode of the Wisco Fanatics Show, where we cover the Packers, Bucks, Brewers, and Badgers basketball and football teams from an optimistic and realistic perspective.
Alrighty, welcome back to another Wisco Fanatics Tuesday evening. Tonight is part 2 of our NFL draft series. We're looking at the 2026 NFL draft. We're looking at it from the Packers perspective. We kind of explained it last week, but we're going to explain it again just for anybody who's watching this week's episode first. We're doing our draft series a lot different this year. The last 3 years we've done it, we've basically just gone 1 through 10, the players that we think are the 10 best at the positions of need that we identified for the Packers. We get to a point where if it's a loaded draft class at a certain position, all the players, from that given position could be gone before we get to the second or third round of the draft. So this year, we're going round by round. We're looking at the rounds with the Packers picks, where we would take certain players based on where the Packers are picking. And then we are looking at a top 10 list, which is not necessarily the wide receiver that we think is the best, but the player that we think is the best pick where he can be had or where he could potentially be had. Obviously, the draft is never going to go exactly as it's predicted. So, we might like a guy who is projected to go in the second round and the third round, and you might be able to get him in the third round. You might have a guy who's projected to go in the fourth that you would take in the third, and he goes in the second. So you never know. But we're going to give our guys, based on where we would take them, as our top 10 and some of the guys that we'd like to see the Packers potentially target to hopefully give some more relevant information this year and hopefully cover some more players that do end up becoming future Packers. So with that said, today we were very excited. We've been looking forward to this one basically since last week's shows ended, and we did quarterbacks and running backs last week. We're like, all right, dude, I can't wait for next week. We do wide receivers and tight ends. So we're going to start with wide receivers. Now, we were looking at this, and when we started, we were looking at the Packers' positions of need, and we do have wide receiver on our list. We were prepared for Romeo Doubs to leave in free agency, and he did. He ended up signing with the New England Patriots, and now one of the other possibilities that we were preparing for would be Dontavian Wicks being traded. Matt LaFleur was in Arizona with all the other coaches, and there were some interviews that there were some players that were reportedly unhappy with their roles, and Dontavian Wicks was listed as a player, not by Matt LaFleur, but by other analysts that is a guy who had previously expressed frustration with his role. So, and then there's also reports coming out that there are several teams rumored to be pretty heavily interested in Dontavian Wicks. So that's another possibility. So that's why we're looking at wide receiver. Looking at guys, ideally in the third round or later. We're pretty resolved that the Packers' second round pick, basically their first pick of the draft, should probably be a cornerback, but we're going to get to defense in 2 weeks. Next week's going to be offensive line. Today is wide receivers and tight ends. So, Jake, let's start in the second round. Scott, welcome back. Let's start in the second round. I know we're kind of looking more round 3 and later, but are there any guys that you would be okay with in the second round at wide receiver?
Yeah. Well, first of all, welcome in, everybody. Second episode of this draft series, 2026 Green Bay Packers. One guy that I would be okay if they were just like, hey, we're going to replace that production we lost at wide receiver. We're going to double down on this position 2 years in a row with our first pick. I would be okay with Denzel Boston out of Washington. Vertical field stretcher, has really good size. He's a really good player they were actually a pretty good offense last year up until they faced the Green Bay Packers, the Wisconsin Badgers last year. We shut them down pretty well. To the Badgers' credit, they were playing good defense second half of the year. So I'd be okay with Denzel Boston in the second round.
All righty. I have 2 guys. I have Eric McAllister from TCU, and I have Bryce Lance from North Dakota State. Okay. And then I do also have a bonus one. I have Chris Bell from Louisville. He's basically going to be a draft and stash as he's recovering from an injury. Otherwise, he would almost guaranteed be a first-round wide receiver. So those are the 3 guys that I have in the second round. Who do you have that you would take in the third round, pick 84?
All right, so I have a few people that I would take in the third round. Antonio Williams out of Clemson, good player. Zachariah Branch, he was kind of third round, maybe fourth round kind of guy for me, but he just has such an elite ceiling that I'd be okay if they took him in the third round. and Casey Concepcion. Great name, first of all. But I would take him in the third round in a heartbeat.
Yeah, the only third round guy that I have is actually Josh Cameron. So, spoiler alert, he's going to be discussed a little bit later when we get to the guys that we're going to highlight in our top 10 list. All right, I'm going to be fair warning to you. My fourth round and my sixth round, I got a lot of names.
Okay.
Jump into the fourth round. What wide receivers would you take?
I don't actually have any fourth round grade guys. I have all fifth and sixth round guys.
All righty. So, fourth round, I have Reggie Virgil from Texas Tech. I have Jacoby Lane from USC. Skylar Bell from UConn, former Badger. Kevin Coleman Jr. from Missouri. Brennan Thompson from Mississippi State. He was kind of a combine standout. He ran the 4.26 40 and was clocked by Next Gen Stats at 23.95 miles an hour, which is just ridiculous. So combine darling who might end up boosting his draft stock a little bit earlier than I'd want to maybe take a guy like that. But I also have Dejon Stribling from Ole Miss, and he is actually the best run blocker in the class as far as wide receivers go, with a 76.6 grade from PFF as far as run blocking goes. And again, we always give the disclaimer to take PFF grades with a grain of salt, so we're not using him as gospel saying that he's going to be a great run blocker in the NFL, just telling you he was graded as the best run blocker in this wide receiver class, Dejon Stribling from Ole Miss. So let's jump into round 5, pick 158. Who would you take for the Packers in round 5?
That's actually where I have Jacoby Lane out of USC. He just didn't wow me enough for me to move him up around or have him in the round where he's projected. I would much rather take that guy with that body frame in a later round and just see if we can make it work.
That's
and then I also have,
I'll be honest, he's not in my top 10, so I understand where you're coming from, even though I have him in my fourth round.
I also have Skylar Bell as a fifth rounder on my list as well.
All righty. In the fifth round, I have C.J. Daniels from Miami. I have Tyron Montgomery from John Carroll, and you're going to be like, John Carroll, what the hell is that? He's essentially a D3 school, but he's one of those guys who you kind of look at his numbers and you just be like, this dude was insane. Had insane numbers, even though he was at a smaller school. Basically one of those guys you kind of take a flyer on. Now, what I will say with Tyron Montgomery coming from a small school, he's 6'1", 185, so he's got decent size. You'd like to put some muscle on. But he did do well at the Senior Bowl. So guys that are going to be his potential future peers, he did do well there. So I wanted to throw that out there. So let's jump into the sixth round. Who would you take at pick 199 for the Packers?
So I have Dane Key from Nebraska, 3-year starter at Kentucky before that. I have Malik Benson from Oregon. I have Barion. I knew I was going to do this. Barion Brown. I literally knew I was going to do that, bro. I was trying to tell myself beforehand, like I looked at his name and everything, whatever. And then I have Cade Harris out of Air Force. He's an interesting one. Number 21 wide receiver, man. That's just that's wrong.
That's funny that I'm going to have another guy that's going to be very similar but different a little bit. Yeah. Taylor said to pick 199, he would pick me. Hey, I'm 6'6". I'd probably fit better in the tight end section. Just throwing that out there.
Hey.
Especially at 255.
Drake London's a big wide receiver. Drake London's a big, tall wide receiver, Tyler.
But I probably weigh 50 more pounds than he does.
Doubt it. He's a big guy.
All right. For the sixth round, I have Deion Burks, Ted Hurst, Dane Key, Caleb Douglas, Chase Roberts, Eric Rivers, Lewis Bond, Colby Young, Eli Heidenreich. He's from Navy. So not an Air Force guy, but I have a Navy guy. I probably would have put him in the fifth round, but he is very, very similar to Savion Williams, so I put him down into the sixth. I have Jeff Caldwell from Cincinnati, another guy who really stood out at the combine. He is 6'5", 216 pounds. He ran a 4.31 40 and has a 42-inch vertical. There are only 3 players in the history of the combine who have 6'3" or taller height, a sub 4.35 40-yard dash, and a 40-plus inch vertical. Jeff Caldwell is one of them. DK Metcalf is one of them. And spoiler alert, Bryce Lance is one of them. So that's my sixth round, guys. And I broke my seventh round up into early and late seventh rounders. So Jake I don't know if you have your guys like that, but if you just want to hit me with your 7th rounders.
Yeah, I just have Jeff Caldwell and Reggie Virgil out of Texas Tech as my 7th round guys. Just guys that if you were trying to throw a dart at a board, they'd be one of my picks.
All righty. Taylor said he would actually pick himself the short king. We'll be talking about some short kings next week for sure when we get the guards.
We could do that.
I will for the 7th round at 236. I have Aaron Anderson from LSU, Vinny Anthony from Wisconsin. Probably less of a need now, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Jordan Dwyer from TCU, and then at the 255 spot, I have Hank Beatty from Illinois, who was an academic All-American, something that there is some stock put into. So, and then I have Caden Wetjen from Iowa. He's specifically going to be a special team return man, which again, the addition of Sky Moore makes that a little less necessary, but still something again that I would not be opposed to having more investment in the special teams. So let's get into some top 10s. So let's go 10 down, and I'll give the context with me looking at where I'm coming from on my wide receiver list. I would like the Packers to leave the draft with one of the guys who is like 6'3", 6'4", between that 210, 220 mark. So the guys that I'm looking at kind of there are like Bryce Lance, Eric McAllister, Chase Roberts, Caleb Douglas, Jeff Caldwell, Colby Young. Essentially just trying to see, again, like you said, darts at a board, if we can get 2 Christian Watsons, essentially. Which, again, spoiler alert for something I'm going to say later, but Jake, hit me with your top 10. Let's start at number 10. Who is your number 10 wide receiver?
Number 10 is actually, Dane Key out of Nebraska. I think that he just brings a ton of value, especially where I rated him. He's a polished wide receiver, 4-year starter as a D1 wide receiver. Has some work to do on his zone reads, but other than that, I'd be okay with a late round flyer on him.
Yeah. Number 10, again, this is, like I said, it's a little bit of a different situation now, but I did have Vinny Anthony, number 10, just for special teams investment. And again, with the signing of Sky Moore, that kind of changes things now. So I'd be open to swapping in one of those other bigger guys, like I mentioned. But again, I'm still not opposed to grabbing another potential special teams weapon in the 7th round if it means investing into special teams and improving in that area. All righty, who's your number 9?
My number 9 is Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. Again, we have to keep saying this. We're not giving like a full top 10. Like, this is our top 10 guys. Like, we're equating value and their fit in the Packers offense. Omar Cooper Jr. is easily one of the better wide receivers in this draft. But for where you're going to have to draft him, that's why he is number 9 on my list. Yeah,
just for context, like my 10 through 6 are a 7th rounder, a 6th rounder, a 4th rounder, a 5th rounder, and a 6th rounder. So like it's not the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 guys. Like, you can go Google that if you want that kind of stuff. We're really, really, really trying to do this Packer specific as to like where we would take guys. So my number 9 is Chase Roberts in the 6th round at pick 199. Chase Roberts is one of those big guys. He's from BYU. He's 6'4", 210. He is one of those wide receivers that I'm trying to leave with another guy who's big like that. All righty. Who's your number 8?
That's where I have Cade Harris out of Air Force. Immediately after this, you start seeing me get into some themes here with special teams. Again, we were making these lists before some of the recent events that the Packers did, but Cade Harris is interesting. I really like how he catches everything with his hands, man. I think he could be a diamond in the rough, really.
Okay. So I mentioned it already. I have number 8 is where I have DeJon Stribling from Ole Miss. He's 6'2", 210. And like I said, when I mentioned him in the 4th round, he is the best run blocking wide receiver in the class of 2026. So in the 4th round, taking a guy who's going to be able to do something that can help you right away in being a good blocking wide receiver, something we know that the Packers have stock in, would be something that I would be very interested in. So who's your number 7?
My number 7 is Skylar Bell. Obviously, Badgers fans remember him very well. Big play guy, really good quickness on the getting the ball in his hands and getting up the field. So He also has some special teams ability. So, again, you're going to start seeing some themes here.
Yeah, definitely a theme on my list as well. Number 7 is where I have Tyron Montgomery, and looking at him as a 5th-round pick, he's a guy, like I said, he's the guy from John Carroll. He's 6'1", 185 pounds. He was an absolute monster in D3, and you might see that and be like, why would you take a D3 guy in the 5th round? If you are looking at a guy who did well, like I said, at the Senior Bowl, something, again, that the Packers put stock into, and you're talking about 5th-round picks, and I get that the Packers have to be a little more careful. You know, they can't reach quite as much this year and next year. Next year's a little bit different, but with no 1st-round pick. But next year they have a lot of picks, especially with some of the comp picks that they're projected to get. So next year is probably one where they can be a little riskier, but I feel like Tyron Montgomery, with him doing well at the Senior Bowl, something the Packers put stock into, is a dart throw that I'd be willing to make as my number 7 wide receiver.
Mm-hmm. So my number 6 is Antonio Williams out of Clemson. Again, this guy is like actually really good. He has elite foot quickness, good route runner. He has really good body control. He's not the biggest guy in the world. I believe he's 5'11" or 6 foot, wherever you depend to look. He's a little under 200 pounds, but he's primarily a slot Z receiver. But Antonio Williams is a really, really good player. Taking him that high in the draft, we'll have to see how the board falls, but he'd be a really interesting pick for LaFleur.
All righty. Number 6 is where I have Caleb Douglas. And again, looking at my list, there's definitely a theme here. Caleb Douglas from Texas Tech, 6'4", 204. All right. Top 5.
Number 5 is where I have Jacoby Lane out of USC, strictly for his size. I was thinking size as well. I don't know how many times I have to talk about using Christian Watson in the red zone before it actually starts to freaking happen. I mean, I don't mean to go on a tangent, but it feels like LaFleur doesn't use any of his big body guys in the red zone. I mean, we talked about the potential with Luke Musgrave in the red zone. We talked about the potential with Tucker Kraft in the red zone. We talk about the Christian Watson in the red zone. I mean, and the guy that we threw the ball to, and he's not small. He plays for New England now. He's 6'2". So that was the guy we decided to throw jump balls to, not a 6'5" guy with a 40-plus inch vertical. So Jacoby Lane has really good body control, and he could be a red zone nightmare.
Number 5 is where I have Jeff Caldwell, the freak athlete from Cincinnati. If you can get a guy in the 6th round who has similar combine stuff to DK Metcalf, that's really all you would need to say to me to be like, yeah, I'd spend a 6th round around that.
Yeah, I'm
so 6 is where 5th is where I have a 6th rounder, Jeff Caldwell.
All right, so this guy flew up my top 10 rankings strictly because I think he's getting a little bit underrated, and that's Malik Benson out of Oregon. He's twitchy, is how I would describe him. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right. Number 4 is where I have Eric McAllister. He would be a little bit of an earlier investment, probably in the 2nd round. 6'3", 205 out of TCU. He is one of the better wide receivers in the draft class. But that is why I do have him 4th on my list and not, top 1 or 2, even though he might be one of the better ones in the class. So who's your number 3?
Well, now I got to talk for a second because it's my first guy that I'm highlighting, and it's Zachariah Branch out of Georgia, previously of USC, spent his first 2 years as a Trojan from Las Vegas, Nevada, 5'10", 180. This guy has, I don't care what anybody says, this guy has the highest ceiling in the class, in my opinion. His acceleration alone is impressive, and lets you wonder, what if this guy gets a full route tree? And I believe that Georgia was the first year that he was really developing a route tree. I think at USC they used him as a gadget wide receiver just because of his elusiveness. He has some kick returning experience, has a touchdown as a punt return and a kick return in his career, has 1 rushing touchdown, 9 receiving touchdowns. He can score from all over the place. He's another guy with track speed and elite ability in space, almost impossible to tackle from behind. He's one of those guys that if he breaks through the line, offense, get your helmets on because we're going back on the field. He's great on crossers. He's really good on out routes. He can make a guy or two miss just with his feet. Bubble screens, jet sweeps. You're starting to see where I'm seeing the fit with the Packers offense. We like to do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I would like number 11 to not have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like number 9 to not have to do that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with 0 doing it next year because he's fresh.
Yep.
I'm okay with 83 doing it even.
And 0 has the speed for it. Matthew Golden, that's one of the things that he was probably why he was taken in the first round is for speed.
Yep. And Zachariah Branch he has that kick returner feel to him when he gets the ball in the open field where like he can set something. It's almost like a point guard in basketball. Like when they're running a play, they're running up the court, they can see, oh, okay, this guy's going to cover this guy. Okay, I got to throw it over here and look over here. Like he has that feel. That's kind of how kick returners kind of have it. And him on jet sweeps is just incredible. Like I said, he still has to develop a little bit more of his route tree, and he has to get his strength up a little bit. He gets knocked off of his man coverage routes, but in zone, he understands where to sit down. And when he gets the ball, watch out, dude. Like he's high on my list because I'm like, dude, this is the most boomer bust guy in this class.
Yeah, and I'm open to some of the slot guys that are in this class. I mean, Eric Rivers, I have in the 6th round. He's 5'10", 176, just so that they can have a true slot guy to do all that gadget stuff like you're talking about, so that Jaden Reed can just play wide receiver.
Yeah.
So I 100% understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
My number 3, I have Colby Young as a 6th round wide receiver at pick 199, and this is really kind of where we're at with highlighting this stuff. My number 3 wide receiver is a 6th round pick in my mind, just because I'm looking at the value, the potential, and where these players can be taken. And that's why we're doing it this way. So Colby Young, 6'5", 220 out of Georgia, another big body wide receiver. You mentioned Drake London kind of jokingly before, but it's a similar size to a guy like Drake London. And again, if you can just take a shot on a guy like that in the 6th round versus the 8th pick overall, like that's really all you need to say to me.
Yep.
All right, top 2.
Okay, so my number 2 is Denzel Boston out of Washington. I talked a little bit about him. He's a vertical field stretcher with great size, great hands. He's going to have to come off the board really early, but he was so good that it was impossible for him to be ignored and not on my top 10 list, honestly. That's just how I felt about him.
Yeah, I feel kind of similarly about my first guy to highlight, and it's Bryce Lance and numbers. And obviously the school that he came from, and you're going to be like, oh, that sounds all really familiar. And, we originally were looking at wide receiver, and we're like, all right, guys, that we would take round 3 or later. Bryce Lance is one of the guys that I'd be willing to dip up into the 2nd round for. Mm-hmm. He is 6'3", 209 from North Dakota State. There is a 148.4 QBR when targeted with him. He stood out on Cole Payton's tape, actually, when I was watching quarterback tape. I already noticed Bryce Lance before we even got to wide receivers. He had 4 100-plus yard games and 1 game of 98 in 2025.
Jesus.
He caught 51 out of 69 targets for 1,079 yard downs. That is a 21.2 yards per reception. That is stupid.
Yeah, it is.
He averaged 6.7 yards after the catch per reception. Only had 3 drops. He was 8 of 12 for uncontested catches. So, again, to Jake's point of having a big guy and throwing in the ball like that, he had a 4.34 40 and a 41.5-inch vertical, again, putting him in that same combine standing out of DK Metcalf. Looking at his 2024 numbers is even crazier. He had 75 receptions on 99 targets for 1,069 yards and 17 touchdowns.
Jesus.
He was 16 for 26 uncontested catches and only 2 drops. He is a good run blocker, graded at 63.6 with 60 being the average. He's fast. He can jump. He has good hands. He's good after the catch. He fits well with the Packers' philosophy of like elite traits that they can kind of refine. He does need some refinement in his route running. But looking at it, I mean, the similarities between him and Christian Watson are, I mean, they're there. It's really not something that's like needs to be, crazy explained, but I do have some numbers for it. Christian Watson in 2021 had a 142.9 QBR when targeted. There's only a difference of 6 there. Had 43 receptions on 62 targets for 801 yards and 7 touchdowns. Again, pretty similar to Bryce Lance. Had 18.6 yards per reception. Lance is at 21. Averaged 8.0 yards after the catch per reception. So a little bit better than Bryce Lance there, but only 4 drops and was only 3 for 5 on contested catches. So again, to your point, I mean, everywhere Christian Watson's been, they haven't been trying to use him on contested catches enough and giving him some opportunities to make some plays like that. But looking at Bryce Lance, he's a 2-inch shorter version, basically a carbon copy from Christian Watson at North Dakota State.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hit me with your number 1.
Number 1 is KC Concepcion. Man, what a name, dude. 2 years at NC State, transfers to Texas A&M this past year. He's a hands catcher. First thing I look for in a wide receiver is how does he catch the ball? Does he use his hands? Does he use his body? If he uses his hands, it's 2 big pluses for me, man. He uses his body, I'm like, okay, let's see what else he does. Does he block well? Does he have, formation, verticality where he can beat you over the top from any position? I mean, slot fades are a big thing nowadays. So that was one of the first plays I saw from KC was him beating you over the top. And he could do that in multiple different ways. I mean that in 2 different ways vertically. He has a 45-inch vertical. This guy's a fucking freak, dude. I mean, 5'11", plays like he's 6'5", bro. It's insane. Big play guy, chunk plays, and in the red zone. He has a scary ability after the catch. He has an FU mentality after the catch, man. Like he's trying to just continue to – he's going to drag you as far as he can, pretty much. Clearly, that's why he was a punt returner. This is another guy with some special teams ability. I was super high on, and then all of a sudden we signed a guy with special teams ability, which I'm like, hey, cool. I like that, though. He had a few return for TDs. He had a massive punt return this last season in a game at LSU where they were Texas A&M was highly ranked, and that was a big-time matchup. He also had a massive return versus Texas late in the season when Texas was making their late-season surge. So this is a guy who makes plays in the biggest games. Some guys just have that ability to find running lanes, and he clearly has it. So in 2025, he had 61 receptions, 919 yards, 9 touchdowns, 15.1-yard average. This is a guy that basically lived in the slot, and then this past season, 65% of his routes were run from the outside. So he's obviously developing into a nice wide receiver. He had 10 rush attempts for 75 yards and a touchdown this last year, and he had 26 punt returns, 456 yards, and 2 returned for touchdowns. So in his career, I left out the best part. I forgot to say this. This is a guy that when he went – oh, no, that's a different guy. Sorry. I'm talking about tight end now. Sorry. My notes are all together. I'm just going to say this. He's better versus man than zone. He averages 2.63 yards per route run. Man versus zone, it's only 1.88. So he has to get a little bit better at zone defense because zone defense is just the bee's knees in the NFL. Average around 60 to 61% is run in the NFL. He's the winner of the Paul Hornung Award, most versatile college player in college football. So that's a pretty cool award to win.
Oh, cool.
And like I said, 65% of his snaps were outside. His career, he has 1 passing touchdown, 3 rushing touchdowns, 25 receiving touchdowns, and 2 return touchdowns. This guy played 3 years in college football and scored 30 goddamn touchdowns. This guy has a nose for the end zone. So I like that. I like scoring points because that's how you win games. And, I just think that's a good ability to have.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty well-deserved Paul Hornung Award for him.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number 1 guy is Josh Cameron, and I think if you look at some of the guys on my list, my top 2, both of them are guys who stood out on quarterback tape. Mm-hmm. I'm a really big advocate for when I'm watching something and I'm looking at something like quarterbacks, for example, or if I'm watching like offensive line tape and I see players stand out when I'm not looking for them, are the guys that I feel like I end up putting more stock into. Mm-hmm. And Josh Cameron absolutely 100% fits that list or fits that that dynamic. So Josh Cameron is 6'1", 224 out of Baylor. Now he's got some beef. And he stood out to me when I was watching Sawyer Robertson, who was very high on my quarterbacks list last week.
Mhm.
With his size, he could almost pass as a tight end. And the weird thing is he wears number 34, which made for a really interesting perception when watching him. Because sometimes he looked like a running back. Sometimes he looked like a tight end, which is what I thought he was originally before finding out he was more of a wide receiver. But because of his build, he can kind of do all of those things. So he only had one drop the entire 2025 season, and it was actually in week 1. He's been targeted 261 times in his career and only has 7 career drops. He had 69 receptions on 102 targets for 872 yards and 9 touchdowns in 2025. He had 10 touchdowns in 2024, so 19 touchdowns receiving in just the last 2 years. 16 for 27 on contested catches. And again, to Jake's point, in 2024, Josh Cameron was all Big 12 as a punt returner. He averaged 20.7 yards per reception on 14 punt returns in 2024. Those 69 receptions that he had were first in the Big 12. He averaged almost 5 yards per reception after the catch, averaged over 6 in 2024. He's not super explosive or twitchy, but he does rely more on his size, which in a scheme like the Packers have, they're not really so much relying on guys to get themselves open. The scheme is designed to do that. So I think you can kind of absorb a little bit of that, potential lack of twitchiness by having him in like a West Coast offense where you're scheming guys open versus, the Devontae Adams route running, quick release to get themselves open.
Fair.
He's a really reliable middle depth target. He's a good run blocker. And then he was also at the Senior Bowl. At the Senior Bowl, he was good downfield, which is something that I did not have on my tape from him. So that's something even more from him to show at a postseason event like the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl, the American Bowl, stuff like that. Again, the Packers are big on the Senior Bowl. And when he was asked about what he wanted people to say about him at the Senior Bowl, he said, a great football player, but an even better human being. So that good size, a good blocker, a punt returner, draft him. I'm a big Josh Cameron guy. And I'm
character. I like that. I like that a lot. Nicely done.
All right. Ready to jump into tight ends. You were more excited about tight ends. I was excited
That's
about
a crazy sentence.
Dude, seriously. I want one of those big 6'3", 6'4", 210 to 220 pound guys. I want one of those. And now let's go to tight ends and talk about guys who are 6'5", 6'6", even bigger.
You didn't catch that, bro?
I didn't catch it.
You said, are you ready to jump into some tight ends, bro?
All right.
Sorry, dude. Sorry. Yes, I've heard your thoughts.
Let's jump in face first.
Face first, dude. You might as well.
Right. Are there any, and again, we looked at this and we're like,
yes.
we're looking round 3 or later, even round 4 or later in an ideal world, just because, again, with not having a first round pick, you're kind of a little bit behind the 8 ball on what you're going to do with picking for needs in the draft. Michael thought it was funny.
That was funny.
Are there any guys you'd be willing to take in the second round at the tight end position?
Not second round, no.
Okay. What about the third round?
I'm going to say no, but it's a maybe.
Okay. I have 2 guys that I would be willing to take in the third round. One of them you're going to be really happy about, and the other one is just another guy who stood out on tape when watching other players. I have Eli Stowers and Michael Trigg. I would take both of them in the third round. All right. Fourth round. This is my deepest round of tight ends. So who would you take in the fourth round at tight end?
So fourth round, that's where I have Eli Stowers. He was one of my top guys. I just flipped my page. I forgot to flip my page. I apologize. And then also fourth round, I have Sam Roush from Stanford.
I also have Sam Roush from Stanford in the fourth round. I also have Justin Jolly from NC State. Jack Andrews from Texas and Max Clare from Ohio State. I do really feel like not great about taking tight ends from Ohio State because I have not liked one in a long time.
Yeah.
Like I was not a big Jeremy Ruckert guy, and he is not good in the NFL, so I feel a little vindicated on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do also have Eli Raridon from North Dakota in my 4th round tight ends. So who do you have in the 5th round? Sorry, that's not North Dakota. Sorry.
The mentioned Eli Raridon is in my 5th round. I have Michael Trigg in the 5th round, and I have Nate Borkircher from Texas A&M.
I would love if we could get Michael Trigg in the 5th round. That'd be amazing.
He's a weird guy.
He's 6'4", 240. He's like, you'd want your tight end to be a little bit bigger, but he's also like way too big to be a wide receiver.
Yeah.
All right. The 5th round is where I have Tanner Koziel from Houston and Joe Royer from Cincinnati.
Okay.
All right. Round 6.
Marlon Klein, Joe Royer from Cincinnati.
All right. 6th round, I have Daquan Wright from Ole Miss and Dallin Bentley from Utah.
Oh, okay.
All right. Who you got in the 7th?
Jack Andrews from Texas.
Okay. In the 7th, I have Josh Cuevas from Alabama and Oscar Delp from Georgia.
Ooh,
all right. Let's talk some top 5 tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your number 5 tight end?
Number 5 is Marlon Klein. Like I said, I pick him in the 6th round. He's a late round flyer, decent blocker. I'll be okay in the 6th round with him.
Yeah, my number 5 guy is Daquan Wright. If the Packers can get him in the 6th round, he's another guy who he is 132 rating when targeted and averaged 16.3 yards per reception as a tight end. Mm-hmm. I should have said this when we were going into the tight ends, but we're essentially looking for a guy who could potentially replace Luke Musgrave as tight end 2, somebody who is a little more ideally durable and can fill in as another pass catcher, but in an ideal scenario, not a guy who, when he steps onto the field, that the Packers are throwing them the ball because, it's not Luke Musgrave's not a great blocker as a tight end. When he comes onto the field that they're probably throwing the ball. Similar to Chris Brooks. When the Packers are bringing Chris Brooks onto the field, they're probably passing because they're going to have him pass blocking.
Yep.
All right. Who's your number 4?
That's where I have Eli Raridon. Really good value. I'm not going to talk too much because somebody else is going to, but he's a better prospect than I think he's going to credit for.
Yeah. I feel a little similarly about Josh Cuevas from Alabama. Again, he's projected to go in the 6th or the 7th. I'd be okay with taking him in the 7th round, but he's 6'3" as a tight end, which is a little undersized. But he's got good route running. He's a willing blocker, and he doesn't give away the play by being on the field. Like I said, if Josh Cuevas comes onto the field, you don't automatically know if the Packers are running or passing just because he's added to the package. So, who's your number 3?
Falling in line with your trend where you don't know what's going to happen, I have Oscar Delp out of Georgia. Very, very good blocker, willing blocker. See, he's one of those sickos that, like Tucker Kraft, that seems like he wants to block because he gets to dominate somebody. And he can also catch the ball a little bit. Saw him a couple times. You talk about noticing guys when you're watching other players. When I was watching Zachariah Branch a few times, Oscar Delp was out on the edge, blocking corners, getting up to the next level and getting a safety. Oscar Delp is a good player, hustle player, and he's straight up, in my opinion, he's a winner. And I want those kind of players on my team.
So it's funny. In my notes for Oscar Delp, he does the dirty work with the ability to go up the seams, and 155 of his 261 yards were after the catch.
Yep.
So he'll mix it up. Number 4, I have Tanner Koziel, and I'll be blunt. He is kind of like cut from the same cloth as Musgrave, where he is pretty much just more of a pure pass catcher than a do-it-all tight end. But if the Packers could get him in the 4th round, I would be okay with that.
So my number 2 is Eli Stowers. This is the guy that I chose to talk about a little bit more. So this is where I was getting into my extra notes because I was talking about a guy that played for Texas A&M last year. And Eli Stowers, interestingly enough, was a 4-star quarterback recruit and signed with Texas A&M out of high school. So this is a guy who sat 2 seasons as a reserve quarterback. He's 6'4", 239 pounds. That's a massive quarterback, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was that big when he was a quarterback, but
Fair.
he transferred to tight end full time, switching to New Mexico State, and then he transferred from New Mexico State to Vanderbilt because he followed his offensive coordinator. So this is a guy who has the ability to cover ground quickly. He has good, soft, what people will call reliable hands. He has very long arms with an insane vertical. There's another guy with a 45.5-inch vertical. He make him ability at any spot on the field. He lines up everywhere, slot, wide, inline, backfield. He's a real nice tool to have. Great feet to get out of breaks naturally without breaking stride. Turning short, 3 to 4 yard gains and the 6-7 yard gains consistently. That's something that you look for in a tight end, kind of like a running back. You look for them to fall forward. I always look for tight ends to get you an extra yard or two on little out routes, right? It's 2nd and 8, and you throw it to your tight end, and instead of getting you 3 yards, it gets you 6 yards. And now 3rd down seems a lot more manageable, right? Yeah. Those are the winning things that Tucker Kraft did that the Packers lost when he went down, unfortunately. Yeah. He's smaller, so he's not much of a blocker. He needs work against some physical defenders and some man coverage, but he also had some drops. I have to mention that. So some drop problems is what they quoted it as when I was reading about this. But he only is 3 years in the position. So this is a guy that's learning a new position. In 2025, he had 62 catches, 769 yards, and 4 touchdowns with a 67-yard, long touchdown. That's pretty good for a tight end. 67 yards touchdown for a tight end is very good. In his career, 146 catches, 1,700 yards, 11 touchdowns. Remember, only 3 years at the position. He was recruited as a quarterback. He ran the ball 37 times, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground as a tight end, 26-yard long. And passing, he was 5 for 10, 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has a 63-yard touchdown as a passer. So you could do some interesting stuff with Eli Stowers in the offense.
Michael asked the question, which tight end in this class most resembles Kraft mac and cheese? That's an interesting question. I feel like there's not going to be any one-for-ones. I feel like Joe Royer has some of his kind of traits. He needs to improve as a blocker, but he was number 1 first team All Big 12 at Cincinnati. I mean, he's 6'5", 255, so he's similar size-wise. Max Clare, maybe he's a little bit smaller at 6'4", 240, but he's got some good pass catching and he's a really good run blocker. So there's maybe that. That's a good question though. I was not prepared to answer that question.
I would probably say Oscar Delp just because of his willingness to block and he can still get up the seam. He isn't as much of a receiver as we've seen Kraft turn into, but if you're looking for a guy that likes to do the kind of stuff, like the same characteristics, I would probably pick Oscar Delp.
Yeah. Tucker Kraft is definitely faster than Joe Royer also.
Yes. Dude, Tucker Kraft is very good.
Yeah. That was a fantastic pick by Brian Gutekunst.
Yes.
Couple of things on Stowers. You mentioned the 45.5-inch vertical. That's the highest by a tight end since 2003.
Yeah, that's insane, dude.
And then he had an 11-foot, 3-inch broad jump. That's the tight end combine record.
Mm-hmm. So
super athletic Eli Stowers. He was on my short list of guys to be my guy to highlight at tight end. And then he also ran a 4.51 40 and was the John Mackey Award winner, which is the top tight end in college football.
Yeah, dude, only 3 years at the position, dude.
Yeah, that's fantastic. My number 2 tight end would be in the 4th round would be Justin Jolly from NC State. Again, he's a little bit of a smaller guy. He's 6'3", but he's 263 pounds. And he is a fantastic pass blocker. He's a 71.4 pass blocking grade and then added 7 touchdowns. So a willing blocker. He's not super fast, but reason I'm talking about him more, even though he's not my guy to highlight, is that he was the tight end MVP at the Super Bowl.
Ooh.
Sorry, not Super Bowl. Senior Bowl. He was not in the Super Bowl. That would be a weird backwards eligibility thing. Tight end MVP at the Senior Bowl and was described by scouts as, quote, quarterback friendly. So I have Justin Jolly at my number 2. So who is your number 1?
My number 1 is a guy who wore number 1. And this is the guy where I was like, dude, can I switch one of my guys? And I just wanted to talk about him. It's Michael Trigg, dude. This guy, you talk about a fucking Brandon Lloyd ass tight end, dude.
He is a unit for sure.
Brother, he has some of the craziest catches I've ever seen. I swear to God. He's freaking running a crossing route, dude. I think they're at like the 22 or something. They were close to the red zone, but they weren't in the red zone. He catches this ball falling to the ground with one hand at like the 4-yard line. And I'm like, no way this brother caught that shit. No way, dude. And they show the other angle, and I'm like, sure shit, bro. He caught that shit. What the hell? He's basically a big slot wide receiver. Like when you're talking about some of the bigger wide receivers that are basically that you thought were tight ends, I was like, this guy is basically a wide receiver. He just lines up at tight end.
Crazy thing is he plays on the same team as Josh Cameron. So just give me the Baylor offense as all of our backups. Like, damn.
I mean, he doesn't want to block, which I think is a problem for me. But the upside of and this is a big if, and people are going to kill me and be like, how could he be your number one with all these ifs? I'm going to give you a little reality check. The entire draft is if.
100%. Absolutely.
If he turns into this, if he hits his potential, if. The whole thing is if.
Yep.
So if he goes to a team, and we always talk about how Green Bay is a great spot for everybody because it's just football. You got to focus just on football. There's not much of a nightlife and all that stuff. People talk shit about it. But really, we've been successful for over 30 years. Like our entire lives, we've been successful. So I'm not going to complain about it. You can say whatever you want about it. I don't care. We win football games. If you can get Michael Trigg to lock in, because there's some notes on him that say that he has a low motor and he doesn't want to play hard. Like you can get this guy to actually lock in and turn into a blocker. He's a game changer, dude. He reminds me of who's a tight end? I'm blanking on his name, dude.
I feel like
Baltimore Ravens.
Isaiah Likely.
Yes, he reminds me of Isaiah Likely.
I read some comps for him, and two of them are fair. One being Greg Dulcich, one being Sam Laporta. The main one that I read that I couldn't unsee was Evan Ingram.
Evan Ingram. You know, the sad thing is I loved all of those tight ends at one point in my life. Like, I love receiving tight ends. Like, and like he's a good size, 6'4", 240. I mean, dude, who was a tight end that was around that size that we had when we were, in high school? Jermichael Finley. And I loved Jermichael Finley, dude. Yeah. Loved him.
So here's the thing. So you might hear tight end, you're like 6'4". That's not tall enough to be tight end. You guys need to be 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". He has the longest tight end wingspan in combine history.
Yeah.
So he's got some long ass arms.
Yeah.
To go with his 6'4" frame. I wrote in my notes on Michael Trigg that he is literally a walking mismatch.
He is, really.
As far as the blocking goes, he had an average pass blocking grade of 62.3. Again, 60 is the average, so it's pretty close to average. But a 46.0 run blocking grade, which is obviously bad. But in 2024, his run blocking grade was 62.6. So it's like you look at that and you're like, I feel like there's an average blocker in there to go with an above average receiver at the position.
Yeah, and if he's your backup, like you're happy with Kraft. If he's your backup and he gives you average blocking, but he gives you that upside in the passing game as well, where you can run the two tight end sets and both guys can get vertical, get down the field, break tackles. World of mismatches for the Green Bay Packers.
Yep. Yeah, I'd be ecstatic with Michael Trigg. I'd be very excited.
Seeing why I have number one, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely understand with it.
Okay.
My number one is Eli Raridon from I almost said North Dakota again because I have ND written down. It's Notre Dame, which is ND is the abbreviation for Notre Dame.
Yes.
It's also the state abbreviation for North Dakota. That's why I keep getting confused. Notre Dame. Went to Notre Dame. 6'7", 252 pounds. He is a good size, has a good high point ability. I think he's actually arguably the best fit of the tight ends to go with the Green Bay Packers. Being a good receiver and then being basically just an average blocker in the run game and in the passing game. He had 32 receptions on 44 targets for 482 yards, 0 touchdowns, which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. I almost said North Dakota again. Notre Dame has 2 really good running backs that are going into the draft this year. They ran the ball a shit ton.
Mm-hmm.
That said, he had 3 drops, which is 4 for 6 uncontested catches, but averaged 15.1 yards per reception. Again, from the tight end position, that's just, you don't see that very often.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about Raridon is that he was used a lot between the 20s and used a lot in play action. Something that I have been screaming from the hilltops for the Packers to incorporate more into their offense for the last 3 years, it feels like.
Yes.
Looking at it, like I said, with Notre Dame, they ran a lot in the red zone mostly. So he didn't, obviously have the tight ends or the touchdowns. Only had 3 career touchdowns, not a big yards after catch guy. And I can understand being scared away from him potentially in the 4th round because he does have 2 ACL tears in his past, which, he was, like I said, if you can get him in the 4th, I'm okay with it. If you get him in the 5th, I'd be ecstatic. And then looking at Raridon, he's a guy who can play all 3 downs because he is decent as a blocker. And he's good in the passing game. And then you look at a guy like Tucker Kraft, who was kind of similar. And another guy that I would even throw back another comparison to is Robert Tonyan. Is another guy that I would bring up in the same mold as Eli Raridon. A guy who's fast but maybe not quick. Ran a 4.62 40, had a 36-inch vertical, and a 9.66 relative athletic score. Again, another thing that the Packers put stock into. He is a guy that I do feel like could take some pressure off of Tucker Kraft. Obviously, with him coming back from an ACL injury, that is something that I would be willing to take into consideration at the draft. Mm-hmm. And lastly, the reason why he became the guy that I was going to highlight, other than the reasons that I've already given, is the Packers did actually meet with Eli Raridon at the Combine. So I really feel like he's a guy who, like I said, I feel fairly strongly would be the best fit at tight end for the Packers in the 2026 draft.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Thank you for hopping into part 2 of our draft series. I promise next week is going to still be informative, though it is not necessarily the funnest one to do. But we always got to do offensive line because we always know the Packers are going to take some. Again, we switched up a little bit this year. This year we're just doing tackles and interior offensive line, so we're not doing tackles, guards, and centers. We're just doing interior and tackles. So next week, Jake and I'll be back talking about offensive line. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be discussing D-line, edge, and corner. We're doing all the defense into one show. And then 3 weeks from now, we're going to do live mock drafts before the NFL draft starts on April 23rd. So join us again next week for O-line, and we'll have some big board type content coming out now that we've covered 4 positions. So keep an eye out for that as well. And again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys tomorrow for our Wednesday show.
Go Brewers, go Packers.